The scream of the dog shattered the stillness of the Nebraska countryside like a warning siren. It was high-pitched, drawn out, and came from somewhere behind the barn. I dropped the mug of tea in my hand, porcelain exploding across the tile floor, and sprinted out the back door without grabbing a coat. The January air bit into my skin, sharp and unrelenting, but I barely felt it. My boots crunched through the frost-covered grass as I darted past the silent cattle sheds and toward the sound that had frozen my blood. Another bark. This time low and feral. Then silence. I called his name. Waffles. My voice cracked with panic. Nothing. My breath came in white puffs. The farm stretched out before me, barren and indifferent, its usual noise swallowed by the still morning. No rustle of wind, no shuffle of animals, just an emptiness so thick it felt like the land itself was holding its breath. I rounded the corner of the barn and stopped dead. There, pawing furiously at a torn feed sack, was Waffles, a shaggy mutt with one floppy ear and a heart far bigger than his little body. He looked up at me, eyes wide, tail between his legs. Next to him was a small, dark hole dug into the snow-covered dirt. Something shimmered in the moonlight at the edge of it. A glint of metal. My heart thudded as I approached, slowly, as if not to spook the dog or the silence itself. Inside that hole was something I wasn't supposed to find. But before we get there, I need to explain how I ended up dog-sitting on a farm in the middle of nowhere, completely alone, while my husband's family was sipping cocktails in Mexico, and how that night, and that hole, changed everything. It started with a lie. A very specific, carefully designed lie dressed up as a mistake. We were supposed to go to Cancun. All of us. My husband, his brothers, their wives, even the kids. It was a big Preston family vacation, meant to reward a year of hard work and maybe, just maybe, finally give me a chance to be accepted. For 5 years, I had fought tooth and nail to fit in with Mark's family, to be seen not just as the girl from out of town, but as a real Preston. I'd worked their land, cooked their meals, smiled at their insults. I was done pretending not to notice the barbs, the way Linda, my mother-in-law, forgot to invite me to shopping trips or family decisions. I was done being grateful for scraps of affection. Still, I clung to hope. Maybe the trip would fix things. Maybe this time, I'd finally be in the family photos, not just behind the camera. So, I sent in my passport details. Twice. I reminded Linda. Twice. And the day we stood at the airport, I held my breath, praying for belonging. And then I watched her hand out boarding passes to every single member of the family. Everyone but me. "Oh, Ashley," she said, feigning a frown, "I must have forgotten yours." Mark's hand twitched in mine. I turned to him, expecting outrage, protest, at least confusion. Instead, he rubbed the back of his neck and said, "It must be a mistake." But it wasn't. It was a message. A week alone on the family farm. Linda's idea of keeping me useful. They thought I'd be grateful. They thought I'd tend to the chores, keep the place afloat while they sipped rum on the beach. They even left me Waffles, their prized farm dog, to babysit as if throwing me a bone. I went home that day in silence, my luggage full of swimsuits I'd never wear, my mind on fire. But here's the thing about being cast aside, it strips away illusion. I saw everything clearly for the first time. The manipulation, the disrespect, the years I'd spent begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. So I decided to make my own table. But first, I had to find out what they were hiding. Because the Preston farm? It had secrets. I learned from overheard conversations that Linda was behind on paying the workers. That there had been threats of walkouts. That strange trucks came by late at night, dropping off supplies no one talked about. Mark always shrugged it off. Farm stuff, he'd say. But now it was just me and Waffles. And I wasn't just watching over the dog anymore. I was watching everything. That night, after the scream and the hole, I stood staring at the glint of metal in the dirt. Waffles nudged my leg, whining. I reached down, brushing snow away from the object. My fingers closed around a cold, rusted handle. It was a padlock. Not attached to anything. Just lying there, freshly dug from the earth. And near it, a piece of torn denim. Suddenly, I didn't care about Cancun. I didn't care about Linda's approval or Mark's silence. I needed to know what lay beneath the soil. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every creak of the old farmhouse felt loaded. The wind howled through the eaves, and Waffles paced the foot of the bed like a sentry, ears perked, eyes constantly shifting toward the window. Whatever he had uncovered in the dirt wasn't just an old lock. Something had unsettled him, and dogs don't lie. By dawn, I had made up my mind. Armed with a thermos of black coffee and a borrowed shovel from the equipment shed, I returned to the spot behind the barn. The snow had crusted over slightly, but beneath it, the earth was still soft, recently disturbed. As I dug, Waffles circled the perimeter, occasionally letting out a low growl that made my skin prickle. The first thing I unearthed was a tarp. Black, heavy-duty, folded and wedged beneath the soil like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry. I pulled it out, hands shaking. Beneath it, a shallow wooden crate. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to open it. But I couldn't stop now. The lid creaked, reluctant from moisture and time. Inside were old papers, some wrapped in plastic. Ledgers, envelopes, all stamped with the Preston Farm logo. One binder in particular caught my attention. Inside were records. Names. Dates. Amounts. And then, at the very back, a list of employees. Crossed off names. Red ink. Notes beside some. Disgruntled, threatened legal action, unreliable. I scanned the list and froze. A name I recognized. Todd Kimmler. He had worked on the farm 2 years ago. One day he was there, and the next he was just gone. Mark told me he got a better job in another state. But next to his name was a note that made my stomach drop. Last seen arguing with Linda. Inventory discrepancy. Missing, asterisk, asterisk. I flipped through more pages. The deeper I went, the more off-the-books entries I found. Massive orders of fertilizer and fuel that didn't match the farm's crop needs. Thousands of dollars in cash marked consultant payments. Unregistered vehicles. The Preston farm wasn't just running on corn and cattle. They were hiding something bigger. That afternoon, I drove into Hastings and visited the county records office under the pretense of updating a deed. While there, I casually asked for agricultural permits tied to the Preston property. The clerk was nice, too nice. When I said the farm name, her smile faltered. You family? Used to be. She slid a folder toward me, eyes lowered. Careful poking too deep. That land, well, it grows more than crops. The folder revealed what I feared. The Prestons had applied for subsidies they didn't qualify for. Claimed to be housing seasonal migrant workers who didn't exist. And the inspection reports? 2 were falsified, signatures forged. I recognized Mark's handwriting. Waffles barked at something again that night. A car, maybe? I peeked through the curtains. A truck idled at the edge of the gravel road. Black. Windows tinted. Engine rumbling like a warning. Then it backed away. The next morning, I received a message. No name, just a local number and one line. Stop digging or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, heart thudding. This wasn't just about dog sitting anymore. It was about staying alive. I forwarded the message to an old friend of mine from college, now a journalist in Lincoln. Jamie was the one person I trusted not to brush this off as paranoia. Her reply came fast. Get out of there. Now. I'll start digging too. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until I knew what happened to Todd. Not until I knew who else was buried beneath the Preston legacy. Waffles wouldn't leave the hole. After I tucked the crate and the documents into the trunk of the car. Locked away in the spare tire compartment, just in case someone came looking, I returned to the barn to find him still sniffing the earth, digging his paws against the icy ground, whining deep in his throat. I knelt beside him, brushing his head. What is it, buddy? What are you trying to show me? His ears perked, and he dashed around the side of the barn, tail stiff and alert. I followed, boots slipping in the frost, until he stopped beside the storm doors that led into the cellar. They were chained shut. Except, the chain was cut. I crouched down, fingers grazing the broken metal. Fresh. Clean cut, no rust. Someone had been down there recently. This cellar wasn't like the root cellars people used for potatoes and preserves. It had always given me a weird vibe. Mark once told me it used to be a coal bunker converted during the 70s for storage. But even then, no one went in or out. Not the workers. Not even Mark. It was off limits. The lock was gone. The chain pushed aside. The heavy doors slightly ajar. Waffles growled. I hesitated, glanced behind me. Nothing but wind and bare corn stalks. Then I pulled the door open. The air inside hit me like a wall, damp, cold, metallic. I clicked on the flashlight on my phone and descended slowly. The concrete steps groaned under my weight. Waffles stayed at the top, pacing, whining. At the bottom, I found a corridor. Cinderblock walls. A rusted pipe running along the ceiling. The light bounced off strange stains on the floor. Storage room, my ass. At the end of the corridor was a door. Metal. Bolted. And open. Inside, a small room, maybe 10 by 10. Concrete floor. An old cot in the corner. A table. A single chair. And chains. Bolted to the floor. Worn. Like they had been used. I backed out, ball rising in my throat. This wasn't just tax fraud or subsidy scams. This was something darker. This was something human. I ran up the stairs and slammed the cellar door shut. Locked it from the outside. Shoved a hay bale in front for good measure. Waffles barked twice, sharp and urgent. I turned. Headlights. Approaching fast. I grabbed the dog and ran into the woods behind the property. The brush tore at my jacket. Twigs snagged my jeans. Waffles stayed close, silent now, as if he understood the stakes. Through the trees, I watched the black truck roll up the gravel path. Same one from the night before. 2 men got out. Neither was Mark. One was tall, square-jawed, wearing a denim jacket despite the cold. The other had a shaved head and a limp. They walked around the property like they owned it. One of them pointed to the barn. The limping man pulled out bolt cutters. I didn't wait to see what they did next. Waffles and I sprinted across the back pasture, heart in my throat. I jumped the ditch and ran until the lights disappeared behind the trees. We circled back to my car, parked behind the tool shed, and I drove away with no headlights for the first quarter mile. I didn't go back to the hotel. Instead, I drove to Lincoln and met Jamie at a 24-hour diner. She sat in a booth with 2 phones, a laptop, and a file of printouts that made my brain hurt. She pushed a cup of coffee toward me. You were right, she said. The Preston farm is dirty as hell. But this is something else. She pulled out a photo. Grainy. Surveillance camera still. Todd Kimmler. Or what was left of him. That was from a police report in Kansas. Body dumped near a river. No ID. Wallet gone. But dental matched. No suspect. No motive. Until now, I whispered. Jamie looked at me. Ashley, these people aren't just embezzlers. I think they're involved in trafficking. Forced labor. Maybe worse. That cellar, it's not for storage. I rubbed my arms, goosebumps spreading despite the heat. I found ledgers. Notes. Names crossed off. Someone tried to bury it all. But Waffles, he found the first clue. Jamie stared. That dog might have saved your life. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it. Her face went pale. They know. Someone just tried to access my cloud drive. The one I uploaded the Preston documents to. From an IP address in Hastings. I swallowed hard. They're coming. Then we go to the feds, Jamie said. Tomorrow morning. No more games. But I couldn't sleep that night. My dreams were filled with chains. With red ink. With the growl of engines and the howl of a dog. And something else. The face of a woman I hadn't thought of in years. Mark's ex. She had disappeared, too. Jamie didn't let me out of her sight the entire night. We stayed at a friend of hers, a retired state trooper, who owed her a few favors. His cabin sat just outside Lincoln, tucked deep in the trees, with an iron gate and 3 separate locks on the front door. It wasn't glamorous, but after what I'd seen in that cellar, it felt like a fortress. I couldn't sleep. Not because of the fear, though it clung to me like a second skin, but because of the dreams. They came in flashes, a woman crying in the cellar, a dog's frantic scratching, Linda's smug smile, and Mark standing by, silent as always. And the woman from my memory, the one who had come before me. Her name was Rachel, Mark's ex. He never talked about her, but I remembered the whispers at our wedding. She just vanished. Packed up and left. Couldn't handle the farm. But no forwarding address. No social media. No contact. Gone. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Rachel L. Harper. There wasn't much to go on, but eventually I found an old college yearbook photo. Same soft eyes, same dark curls. She looked vibrant. Alive. I cross-referenced her name with Hastings, Nebraska. Nothing recent. But then, in a local paper archive, a blip, a missing person report filed by her roommate 3 towns over, dated 5 years ago. Just 2 weeks after she moved in with Mark on the farm. And it was closed. Abruptly. Reason. Person voluntarily left the area. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Voluntarily. Just like Linda had forgotten my ticket. Just like Mark had let me stay behind. Just like the workers had chosen to leave. Rachel didn't run. She disappeared. And now I had to find out if she'd ever left that farm. The next morning, Jamie and I met with 2 federal agents, real ones, not the bored local deputy who once warned me about raccoons. Jamie laid out everything, the documents, the faked reports, the forged inspections, the mysterious expenses, and the ledger from the cellar. Then I told them about Rachel. They listened carefully. Too carefully. Agent Nunez, the younger of the 2, kept a notebook open but didn't write anything. We'll look into it, he said after a long pause. But these are serious allegations. Do you have physical evidence? Yes, I said. And it's hidden. Because people on that farm don't make mistakes, they make people disappear. They agreed to put a protection detail on Jamie. But me? I'd be safer if I stayed out of sight. Which meant one thing. I had to go back. That night, I parked a borrowed truck on the ridge above the Preston farm. Jamie had hacked the security cams. They'd installed them recently, probably trying to figure out who had broken into the cellar. I watched the feed on my phone. Linda was back. So was Mark. And the 2 men from the black truck? They were eating dinner at the same kitchen table where I used to scrub floors and peel potatoes. Waffles growled low from the passenger seat. Not yet, I whispered. I waited until the house went dark. Then I made my move. Armed with a flashlight, a crowbar, and the fire burning in my gut, I crept down the hill and slipped into the shadows behind the barn. Waffles stayed close, silent, and alert. My first stop, the shed. I retrieved the documents I'd hidden and slid them into my backpack. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I went back to the cellar. The doors were chained again, but poorly. New lock. Cheap. I pried it open with a crowbar, heart pounding. Inside, the air was the same. Cold. Stagnant. But something had changed. The cot was gone. So was the chair. The chains were still there, but one had fresh rust on it, like it had been wet. There was a smell. Coppery. Then I saw it. Etched into the wall. Just above eye level. Scratched in with something sharp, barely legible. Rachel was here. My knees buckled. She'd been here. Imprisoned. Probably worse. I staggered back outside, vision swimming. And that's when I heard the footsteps. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Mark stood at the edge of the cellar stairs, eyes shadowed, lips twisted in something between a smile and a sneer. You shouldn't have come back, Ash. Waffles stood between us, growling. I tightened my grip on the crowbar. Where is she, Mark? What happened to Rachel? He took a step down. She left. Like you should have. Another step. You don't want to know what happens to people who dig too deep. I already know, I whispered. I saw the chains. I saw the ledgers. I know everything. Mark reached into his coat. Waffles lunged. Waffles lunged like a bullet, teeth bared and body low. Mark barely had time to react before 60 pounds of snarling fury hit him full force. His arm went up, not fast enough. The flashlight in my hand tumbled to the ground, its beam spinning wildly across the cellar wall. There was shouting. Scrambling. A thud. I grabbed the crowbar, adrenaline lighting every nerve in my body, and yanked Waffles back by the collar. He growled, chest heaving, eyes locked on Mark, who now knelt on one knee, clutching his forearm where blood began to soak through his coat. "You're insane," Mark spat. This is all in your head." "Rachel carved her name into that wall," I said, trembling. "You kept her here, just like you tried to keep me. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a bitter little girl who couldn't handle the real world." "No," I said. "I'm the woman who finally woke up." Behind us, headlights flared. I froze. Another truck. Tires grinding against gravel. Voices, male, loud, panicked. "She's back there. With him." Mark's face twisted with something I couldn't read. Fear, maybe. But not for me. For himself. "They're not here to help you, Ashley," he muttered. "You think you've uncovered something? You think this is new? My family has run this town for decades. You don't expose us. You get buried." I backed toward the side of the barn, dragging Waffles with me. My phone, the flash drive, the evidence. It had to survive, even if I didn't. Then a new sound cut through the noise. Sirens. Wailing. Growing louder. Jamie had kept her promise. Federal SUVs screeched up behind the black truck. Men in tactical gear spilled out, yelling commands. Red and blue lights strobing across the fields. Shouts. Curses. Two of the men with the truck tried to run. They didn't get far. Within seconds, Mark was face down in the snow, hands zip-tied behind his back. I collapsed to my knees, Waffles leaning into my side as I watched agents swarm the property. Linda was dragged out of the house in a robe, screaming about her rights. Kyle and Derek were rounded up at the machine shed, trying to burn records. One by one, the Prestons fell. It was over. The aftermath took months to unfold. Rachel's remains were found buried near the south fence line, exactly where the corn equipment had been parked for years. DNA confirmed her identity. Linda was charged with obstruction and conspiracy. Mark and his brothers faced a mountain of charges, from tax fraud to illegal confinement to accessory in Rachel's death. The cellar became evidence room number 1. And me? I was finally free. Jamie helped me secure the flash drive with the farm documents. It became the centerpiece of the case. The feds called it one of the most shocking examples of small-town exploitation they'd ever seen. I didn't return to the Preston farm, not even to testify. My statement was enough. I'd already said everything that needed to be said. Instead, I moved to Oregon. I rented a small cabin near the coast. Secluded, quiet, surrounded by trees that whispered instead of judging. I painted again. Landscapes, faces, even Waffles. He stayed by my side through it all, no longer just a farm dog, but family. Sometimes I still have nightmares. About chains. About the look in Mark's eyes when the cellar door opened. About how close I came to vanishing like Rachel. But each morning I wake up, safe, whole, unbroken, and I remember, I survived. I built my life from the ashes of theirs. I turned their lies into truth, their cruelty into justice. I told my story. And now I'm done being quiet.